Jackson Hightower. I'm super excited about this one. We're going to talk about sex and
Yes.
who doesn't love that conversation? And also, I really want to know who is the man behind all the confidence, the sexual experiences, like let's go below the surface. If one of your friends were to describe you, like what would they say?
Um, well, the confidence is there. Uh, um, I think that there's a lot of, I think a lot of people make judgments based on what the exterior of someone is, right? The way that they present themselves or the way that they look or, you know, um, how their own prior experience of people that are like that informs them of how that person may show up. And I would say that, um, you don't always want to judge a book by its cover, you know? So there's a lot of like misaligned judgment or people thinking certain things about me based off of or whatever. And it's always not really true. So I would say like, take some time to get to know, like dive in a little bit deeper and, uncover and explore and find your own experience of me because it may be different than what you perceive or what you may be projecting onto me or something like that. Kindness, genuine, warmth, loyal, trust, confident, fun, eccentric, outgoing, weird, playful. um yeah.
Yeah. What about like sensitive or emotional? I feel like the masculine.
Very.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
have a Leo moon. I'm highly sensitive.
Mm,
Highly sensitive, Leo moon. And also, you know, along with other, men, very sensitive in the areas that we're talking about, sexuality. And that's really the reason, why I got into doing this in the first place was because I had experiences that were not optimal when I was younger. And said to myself, okay, well, that doesn't feel good. So how do I, you know, learn and how do I grow from that so that it doesn't happen again? But yeah, sensitive, I would say emotionally connected. Um, Not as emotionally connected as women are because women are completely different, beings in that respect. I was reminded of that recently, which is beautiful. I don't think men have the capacity to feel nearly as much as women do,
mm.
um, and I think there's reasons for that. But yeah, like for sure, like it's not all like brawn and bravado. And I think one of the things that most people would say is that I have a very developed feminine side as well as the masculine side. So, you look at like someone like Patrick Swayze, right? So Patrick Swayze was, trained in ballet, but also did martial arts. So he was like this lover and this fighter, but and he looked a certain way. And so you'd think a certain thing, but then he could, kick ass. Um, but he also did ballet and he understood how to dance and he understood the sensual, arts. And so my personality type is a blend. It's the martial arts and it's the erotic arts, and it's a bit of both. And they're different, but they're also very similar in the sense that they're disciplines and they're practices.
Yeah.
I trained as a martial artist when I was 4 years old, and I, practiced for about 12 years. Um, and I've done sports and school and weightlifting and all of that stuff. And then in my, 20s and beyond, I started practicing more of the softer arts. And then I believe it's the blend that makes, what I'm doing a bit more unique maybe than others, or a bit different, a bit more my style is that you blend both a masculine appearance and an energy and a physicality with the softer, erotic, sensual side. And that's a pretty interesting combo,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
you
so
know?
many women, like that's beautiful because I really believe so many women are craving that. They say that they want this really tough exterior masculine men to provide and take care of them. But then when the emotional intelligence is missing or the like connection piece, the intimacy piece is missing, there's a level of frustration there. And
Mhm.
I would imagine for a lot of men that that can be a difficult balance to obtain, especially because, we teach boys not to cry, not to show their emotions, man up. There's a million sayings in our culture that kind of push men towards more of like the provider that masculine energy. Like, how did you begin to shift? I know you mentioned just in your 20s that you leaned more into like the softer side of things. Like, how did you begin to even like have the awareness that that felt important?
Mhm. Um, I've always been very kinesthetically aware, and meaning, when you start doing martial arts at the age of 4 and you start playing sports, you're in your body, right? And
Mm.
so that starts with the body, and then playing sports all throughout college, graduating and working in New York when I think one of the moments I walked into the Equinox and I saw these really beautiful women walking into this side studio. This was back in like 2006, 2007. I'm like, what are they doing? And I walked in and said like, yoga. And I'm like, oh, I've heard of yoga before. And so I was like, let's go in there and see what that's about. So, for me, the desire to connect, with the feminine has always been present for me my whole life. That's probably why I'm doing what I'm doing, and I'm not afraid to admit that. It's always been a beautiful experience for me. But having those challenges in college, and in the years after college, where it was clear that I wasn't really skilled in those areas, right? I'd always been pretty good at everything. I'd studied pretty hard. I'd played sports. I'd always excelled. And then in this particular area, it was made abundantly clear to me on like not more than one time. It was like, hey, like this is not working, And so I took a note, right? It's like, okay, I can leave my ego, and I was sure I was like a little bit upset, but I was like, okay, like how do I move through this experience and you know realize that while being a man, like, yes, we are the protectors of the world. Like, we are physically, different than women are, right? If someone is coming into your house, it's the man that is supposed to protect. If someone's coming over your wall or whatever, it's like it's the man that is supposed to go protect. And in doing that, um, having the physicality and the brawn and the exterior and all that stuff is important. But David Data talks about the sort of like the levels of relationship dynamics, like a low level man, a mid level man, and a high level man. He calls it like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And the stage 1 is sort of this like, yeah, he's alpha, he's masculine, but he's like very not conscious, right? And we see that a lot in our culture with some of the other people in the masculine space. And they have not tapped into understanding anything about their emotional capacity, their vulnerabilities, or their depth. And they can do those sort of baseline level masculine things and check those boxes, but there's a lot that's left on the table. And then as men, move into the second level, it's they begin to understand more of their feminine, and sometimes they go a little bit too far, where they get into more of the beta, and they don't actually know where their polarity is in comparison to women, right? And they may find women that are more in their masculine if they're more in their feminine. And then there's the third stage, which is like it elevates beyond that. They've integrated both the masculine and the feminine, and they can operate as this sort of like I call it maybe it's like a healthy masculine role, where you have both sides and you can work with both sides and you're firm and clear and commanding when you need to be, and then you can get into the other side without feeling like you're giving something away or that you're not, tough, or that you're whatever, some word to describe a guy that wouldn't be, operating from his masculine. Because the reality is being a healthy masculine is the ultimate, right?
Mhm.
And that also includes having a bit of that understanding of that feminine side, because we all have both,
Yeah.
right? And most of the time we just don't allow it to come through, you know?
Yeah. Do you think do you think men are craving deeper levels of intimacy the way women are?
Probably not. I think women will always crave deeper levels of more intimacy than men, and they'll want more emotion than men. There's always this push and pull, right?
Yeah.
What women tend to always want more from men than men are able to provide. I do feel that we're entering a part of, our culture where men are seeing that things are shifting and that we need to adapt and adjust, right? If we don't, what are the role models in the relationship at this point? Who is the breadwinner? Women are capable of being financially, independent, etc. But, if a man doesn't feel needed or wanted, he's going to go someplace else, right? He's
Mm.
going to find someone who does need him in some way, emotional, physical, spiritual, whatever the need is. Um, but I do believe that there is a section, of men who do want to go deeper, who believe that that actually is a path to experiencing higher forms of pleasure, bliss, of like, contentment with themselves for sure. Will they, how long will it take them to get there? I don't know. But I believe it's happening. And I also think sort of on like the mass scales. Like my business is for the masses, right? And there's different subsets of people. There's people that are very deep in the practice of Tantra and Taoism, and they do all these things and they go to the retreats. That was sort of me. My focus is more on the billions,
Mm.
right? Like the hundreds of millions of men who don't necessarily have access to this, will never go to these things, are just trying to learn the best that they can, and probably addicted to, porn and their computers, and don't have real levels of intimacy necessarily with women. So I focus more on that side of things. I think that they want to get better. Um, the part that you're talking about is probably more of a smaller segment
Yeah.
of men. I think
Yeah.
men just are like, I'd like to just meet a woman and be sexually intimate, not have to be addicted to porn. That's kind
Mm.
of where I focus, right? Where it's like that's where most of men are right now.
Yeah.
Getting them through those stages. And I think once you get that, you got to meet them where they're at, right? So I
Mm.
think once you get past those initial stages, and there's a level of like, okay, here I am. Now it's like that like, crawling for that depth that there is a yearning for, especially in some men that I meet and I connect with.
Yeah, and you just brought up something that like feels important to me, the desire for men to feel needed. And so I'm so curious because in my last relationship, so I was in a 13-year relationship, got married,
Mhm.
like did all the things that I thought I was supposed to do. And there was so much disconnect in our levels of intimacy. And the thing that I was missing and craving the most was feeling seen, wanted, desired. Like I wanted and needed that so bad, and it just wasn't there. And I felt like I
Mhm.
was communicating that in my own like subtle ways, uh, but maybe like I wasn't being as direct as I needed to be ultimately. But I'm so
Mhm.
curious, like, what is the thing that men like? Because I would argue that most women, that is their deepest need, is to feel wanted, seen, desired by their man. And I, like when you brought that up, it kind of made me think like, oh, is that the same for men, or is there something like, is there a difference there that like the thing that men are craving most from women?
Um, it's funny. I think that men want the same.
Mm.
They want it in a different format, but
Mm.
they want the same, right? When we talk about, men needing to feel wanted or needed, right? Men need to feel like they're providing something. Because otherwise, we're in this stage of where it's like, I don't need a man, I don't need this, I don't need that. It's like, well, cool. If you don't need him, you need a man, then like I don't know if you're ever gonna get one, because a man needs to feel like you need him in some
Mm.
capacity. That's the dynamic, right? And so we as men, um, it's funny because men are always so, complimentary to women and the way they look and this and that. I think men receive less compliments than women do, or
Mm.
less like physical touch than we would probably want or desire. I think that there's this, oh, I can't stroke his ego too much. Like you kind of have to stroke his ego a little bit. Like make him feel like you want him, you desire him in the same way that you want to be, made feel that way. And I mean, I'm only sort of speaking for myself, but like, yeah, I want that for sure. It's important to me. I need to feel like I'm a king. If you're in a relationship, it's like a king and a queen, and you both
Mm.
treat each other like stoking each other's flames, right? Never suppressing each other's light. Never,
Yeah.
never, never, always blowing, oxygen on that fire so that the other partner can show up in their highest. If the partner shows up in their highest, what is that partner's love language, right? For men, it's mostly physical touch, I would say. Like that's
Mm,
not usually the biggest one, right? We don't really, get off on the other things. Words of affirmation can sometimes be good because you're validating him, you
mm,
know. And what I've seen in successful partnerships, or when I feel the most, um, is when a woman goes out of her way to let her know that she sees me,
mm,
that she's like, okay, you know, um, it could be something that I do, it could be a way that I am, it could be a way that she's experiencing me, whatever it is, but it's that communication. And then for me, it's the physical touch where it's like letting, communicating. I think we as humans, we don't touch each other enough. I
totally.
really believe that. So
Yeah.
we do want it. um we may have different languages. I focus on a lot with men. I'm like, what is your partner's love language?
Mm,
Figure it out and do it, and you let your partner know what it is that you like. I think it's very difficult to be with a partner where you're not aligned on love languages.
mm,
I feel
yeah.
that I don't think that in like a true real partnership, I don't think that works.
Mm.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that because you could be fulfilling things that you think that they want, but
Hmm.
actually when they're receiving it, that's not fulfilling any want or need from that for them. And so it's like this
Right.
constant miss of and just ultimately lack of communication. Like I love that you brought up communication because like that's been the biggest lesson for me throughout my adult life and my sexual experiences. And I think this is extremely common, I'll speak for women, extremely common for women because for a lot of us, we're kind of taught to like keep yourself small and make sure that you're like performing for the man, you're showing up for the
Mm,
man. And so for myself, I kept my like sexual desires quiet for a really long time
mm,
and really didn't have the skills or the tools or even like I had the awareness, but like the awareness was so it was present, but it was like I didn't know where to go with it. I didn't know like it was like the words were stuck in my throat and I couldn't speak them
mm,
out loud because I just had
mm,
so much like shame around, being thought of as a slut or if I was too sexual, like what does that mean? And so I kept so much of that quiet whereas like and then ultimately the cost of that was feeling extremely unfulfilled in the bedroom for a
mm.
really really long
Yeah.
time and it took for me becoming a mom to really like gain the confidence and the awareness of like wow okay if I want to break free from this cycle and actually be fulfilled in this part of my life and teach my daughter that it's okay to have wants, needs, and desires, like I better make a big shift right now. And how do I
Hmm.
go about that? And what does that look like? And so starting to like flex that muscle is fairly new for me over the past few years. And tantra, played a big role in that and having like a self-pleasure practice played a big role in that understanding like yes, my love languages, what I like and don't like and then feeling
Hmm.
okay communicating that to a partner.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
I know that this is very common for women and I also feel like it's common for men because I'm noticing how quiet men are in the bedroom. And I say this like I'll just, share openly because I, again, was in such a long relationship and have only recently started dating over the last like year.
Hmm.
And this is something I'm picking up on. And I like really want a man that like knows what they want and will speak that, will
Hmm.
share that openly with me. And it's like, it's not there. And so I'm in this place of like learning to communicate myself and getting better at it, but it's like not reciprocated. And so I'm just so curious with the work that you do because it feels so important. Like, is that something that you notice as well? Like, I just really would love to hear like more of your thoughts on this.
It's a great point. The communication part is key. And I also, we talk about with my buddies, like, in American culture, like when we hook up, we kind of shut up, right? And we're not that vocal. We don't use our voice. We're not, it's very interesting. And, part of it comes from there's this feeling as a man that we have to kind of that we're the ones that are controlling the experience, so that we should kind of know what we're doing, and then like we got it. We don't always got it. We don't always know exactly what that is. But there is a vulnerability in communicating our own desires of what it is that we like, and I'm still getting better at it, but like I'm very communicative about what it is that I like when I'm with a woman. Sometimes it's a point where they're like, wow, like you're really directing me. I love that.
Mm.
And I'm like, yeah, well, because I know what I want, and I know how I like this experience to be, and I want to let you know that I know that, so that you don't have to be fumbling around, you know. Um, but there's it's funny because um I think like we can get shy sometimes about using our voice and communicating. If you're with a partner who's very vocal, sometimes it feels like it's too much for you to also be vocal, you
Mm.
know? And you're like, well, they're doing most of the vocalness, so I could just chill a bit, right? Um, but for men, if they're in an experience and they know what it is that they like, being able to communicate that with their partner is key. And also remembering that a lot of women get turned on by voice with
Mm.
auditory. Men are highly visual creatures. Um, Women are visual, but they're also like they sense more, they feel more, the auditory piece comes in more. And so, we as men can do a better job of um, you know, trying things out, because it's like sometimes we don't want to be wrong, we don't want to say the wrong thing, we don't want to be too aggressive, but like if you don't try something, then or say something, you're never gonna know if it sticks or not, right? And also in the moment, like everyone forgets it the next second anyway, right? So like there's nothing to really be, too shy about. Um, but yeah, that is something we talk about a lot, which is like, what are your desires as men? And how often men are not really asked, well, what
Mm.
is it that you like? Like how do you actually like this experience? Like what is this, experience for you? Um, because we get in this mode where, if men are watching porn, they have these moves that they think they need to do in their head, and then they're performative, but they're not connected.
Yeah.
There's a difference, and if you're performative, it's funny, a lot of guys can get in their heads
Mm.
when they're in a sexual experience, because they're like, okay, like we have to pay attention to a lot. Women are super complex, beautiful creatures, but it's like the sounds, the moans, the body language, the movements that we're doing. There's a lot that's going on, right, at the same time. And I find this is like I'm doing three things at once. That takes a lot of focus. Do I also have the ability to communicate during that time period?
Yeah.
And the answer is probably not, right? Especially if your mouth's occupied. But if your mouth's not occupied, then it's a different story altogether, you know. But, there is to be a really good lover, you have to be present, you have to listen, you have to pay attention, and usually you have to do multiple things at once. And I understand why a lot of men aren't as communicative, especially when they're the ones that are, doing things to the women, is because like there's just a lot that's going on, and so it's tough to figure it out. When there's less going on, and you're having more of an equal relationship, or you're receiving, that's when I find that I'm even more communicative,
Mm.
because I can relax,
Mm.
and I'm not thinking about all the things that I want to experience with this person, or that I want to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is pretty fascinating though.
How how do you help like how would a woman help a man relax more or feel more comfortable or like even just be less in the head and more in the body. And maybe it is like maybe a newer relationship dynamic, but I feel like
Hmm.
both people are craving that. Like you want to
Hmm.
drop in, you want to be, you want to
Yeah.
feel connected. You don't want this performative act. But like what would be helpful for just especially because most of my audience is women, like for women to hear like how can we do a better job to help a man feel more comfortable and relaxed?
Mm. Number one is to, well, so it comes down to the breath,
Mm,
right? So how do you get a man to get in touch with his breath? One thing that I really like is like actually when a woman like just puts her hand on my chest,
mm,
right here, and is just present in that moment with me, it can slow things down a lot,
mm,
right? The second is there's a really cool thing that you can do where you're actually breathing with each other
mm,
to get more connected, and your central nervous system totally relaxes in a way that doesn't when you do anything else. Just, through Yap Yan, where you're actually breathing through each other's, I breathe into your mouth, you take it down, you breathe into my mouth, and you're slow and you're connected. A lot of it has to do with the speed of the experience.
mm,
So, you know, if a guy is like just rushing to get a job done, right? And there's this like goal-oriented thing rather than just like, oh, let's actually experience each other, setting the stage as a woman where, you know, you just want to, you may not even want to do anything sexual,
mm,
right? Like that's overtly sexual. You may just want to like experience foreplay. You want to give him a massage, right? And just slow everything down. So the way you can get a man into his body is, by physical touch, it's by breathing, it's by letting him know that like he doesn't have to do anything,
mm.
that there isn't any like objective or goal, you know. It's just like let's just be here with me.
Yeah.
Elongated kissing, right? Kissing is so incredibly intimate.
Yeah.
So intimate. You're sticking your tongue in someone's mouth. I mean, think of all the fun stuff you could do with that, We just kind of like blow through this stuff like, oh, whatever. I could kiss for hours,
Yeah.
literally hours. It's just so it's just such an interesting experience when you get lost in it, right?
Mm,
So, um, we as men we want to focus on less goal-oriented experiences and more like pleasure-oriented experiences where we're both just experiencing pleasure with each other. And it's
yeah.
not like you have to get her off, and it's not like you have to get off. It's just like let's just be with each other and discover,
Mm,
right? And it may sound a bit weird. Oh, I want to get off. Well, cool. You'll get off. Trust me. As the guy, like it's very easy, you know. But what if you just, relaxed and massaged and connected and, did an hour of foreplay
yeah.
instead of going into anything like too deep. Um, just reassuring them that, you know, giving them compliments, stroking their ego. Those are really helpful for guys to
Yeah.
hear that and to feel the love and the compassion that a woman has for them. When a woman pays a man a very genuine compliment, it's
Mm,
very disarming. And when she's really present and like loving and um, you know, the man can be in a space where he can actually relax, it's powerful
mm.
because you're like, wow, I don't have to like do anything. I don't have to perform. I can just be in this experience without needing to always lead the experience, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you brought that up because I think we're in a time where women feel, especially in like the dating world, where women feel like they have to be, and you said it yourself, the mindset of I don't need a man. Like the I'm independent, I've got my shit together. Like, I want the man to chase after me, to want me, to desire me. And while like that can be true, both can exist at the same time. And I think that's an important message that like men also need to feel complimented. Like you said how disarming that can be. And that can open a door
Mm,
for such a deeper level of intimacy when a woman like does drop the wall and doesn't have this like shield of protection up over her heart and just like allows the softness to exist. And yeah, I think that that's like a really important piece, that something like I'm taking in even myself, because I can feel that in me of like, I don't need to compliment this man. Like he knows he's like he's hot, whatever.
Yes.
He
Yeah,
doesn't
no,
need
no,
more.
that's exactly it. Yeah, I get that so much. It's like, oh, I don't need to do that. Like, yeah, but like, really? Like, you don't think I'm a human, like I
Yeah.
I need to feel love too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, Data, David Data, he's one of the like masters that I've studied all of his stuff, but like he talks about this sort of like this masculine shell that women put over their feminine. Like the natural state of a woman is is technically like not to be like working and doing a job. It's very sort of masculine linear thing, right? Like the feminine energy of woman is to surrender, to take care, to be in communion, to connect, like all the things that women are naturally, very good at. And then we're in this world now where the women develop these masculine shells and they develop these masculine personas and they develop much more of their masculine energy. And we as men, it's not always the most attractive when you meet a woman who's in her masculine. Like I'm the alpha. So if a woman wants to also be the alpha, she's gonna go find someone who's the beta, right? Like I'm
Mm,
not trying to compete with a woman. I have zero desire. I want a woman to be in her most feminine essence possible. Now, again, being a single mom, and it's like you have to do certain things in order to live in this world. So we get that. But at every moment that you're able to drop in and take that shell down. I think that's a really powerful piece for women to understand is that if a man is in his healthy masculine, he's going to want a woman who's in her feminine,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
And, there could be a balance, but if
Yeah.
a guy is more in his, it always equals each other out. It's like 90-10, 80-20, 70-30, right? Right. It's always a mix.
Yeah.
Um, but I like a lot of women are like ball busters. I'm like, yeah, that's just not a feminine characteristic that I particularly enjoy.
Yeah.
And I'm speaking just from my personal experience. So,
Yeah.
um, when a man can step up and protect and provide and take care of that experience, like making sure that she doesn't have to worry about any of the logistical administrative bullshit that a woman might need to deal with in her everyday life, the guy can handle it, right? And
Mm,
yes, that is our burden, right? We're good at that stuff, right?
yeah.
It's natural to us. We're not good at the other stuff that women are really good at. So it's like, let's actually create those, more typical gender roles if we
Yeah.
can and allow, and as men, we need to step up a lot, right?
Yeah.
We need to handle all that stuff without worrying it with the woman, and yeah, maybe she makes her own money and this and that, but like we also have to work ourselves at creating this for our families. So it's different. It's an interesting shift of in our world over the last 50 years, I would say,
Yeah, I
where
totally
men are
agree.
trying to deal to understand how do we work with what do we do now? How do we work in this environment now, right? Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because times have changed so much, and it's no fault on anyone, but it's just
Mhm.
recognizing, again, back to the awareness piece of like, okay, yes, I do have to wear these hats. I do have to provide. I have to take, as a woman, like I do have to work and take care of myself and my family potentially. And also, if I'm sitting in that energy all day long, and that is outside of like my natural state where I feel my best, what can I
Mhm.
do outside of that to make sure that I'm connecting to my feminine energy? And for me, that's movement. So that's like either yoga
Mhm.
or Pilates or some form of moving my body that helps me soften and kind of like release the like I have to get stuff done energy. And
Mhm.
and that
Yeah.
and that, could be different for everyone, and I think that that goes both ways. Like, I love that you talked about the fact that you also do yoga and, like, martial arts, and because that also, like, helps you build a, like, deeper connection with women and with, like, your femininity, which is beautiful, and Yeah, I think it's important for both men and women to figure out what that looks like for them. If there is like a miss,
Yeah.
like if there is a woman that feels like, yeah, maybe I am sitting too much in this like alpha masculine energy, like how do I make a shift? Because I'm so far in it. And I talk to women like that all the time, that very type A, very like they're the provider because they had to be. And they really, really want to connect more to their feminine energy, but they have no
hmm
idea where to even start.
Yeah, yeah. It's actually like an epidemic. A lot of my female friends are coaches and they work with a lot of women who are in that exact same position. They have been they have chosen to do the career path or they're forced to or whatever it was, and they get it because they have to live in this world. We don't live in these communal structures anymore. But then, what is the thing that you're doing at the end of the day to get out of that, right? Is it physical movement? Is it singing? Is it dance? Is it taking a hot bath? Is it putting on a different type of clothing and turning off your phone, right? That the business phone where it's like, I'm not doing that right now. And then I have, another form of communication or whatever it may be. Um, that's something that, I always encourage, my girlfriends to do. It's like find out whatever it is for you and
Yeah.
just make sure you do it and that you do it religiously. And maybe it's deep breathing, maybe it's whatever, self-pleasure practice. Who knows? Everyone has a different way of getting into that space, but it is very important to do. And yes, for men, you know, being physical in your body is important and it's key. And then how do we get more connected to our emotional centers? How do we open up our hips? How do we open up our hearts, right? That's where we need to get to, right? Doing yoga, doing Pilates. Yeah, I do all this stuff. Everyone's like, oh, it's for girls. It's not. It's super hard. Like, trust me. Like, you go do a really intense Pilates class and any guy and you tell me how you feel afterwards, like it's tough, because you're doing all the little muscles, all the intrinsic muscles, and it's a really great complement to the weightlifting that I do and to the other physical, very yang type activities that you do on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis. So
Yeah. Yeah, Pilates is so hard. I love that you said that.
yeah, it's super intense, created by a man.
mm, yeah.
So,
Yeah. Um I, and
interesting.
and so it's like it's pretty clear that you've put in the work. Like that you've done the work. You've done the retreats. You've I would guess even maybe plant medicine ceremonies, like you really have like put in the time and energy to work on this part of
hmm
yourself and it shows. And that's a beautiful thing. And I love that you said that like your message is for the masses because I think that like, there's 0 to 100 on the scale and spectrum of like where you're at and
hmm
meeting somebody where they're at is so important because somebody that's never even heard of tantra, isn't necessarily going to go and explore like those parts of their sexuality. They will
Right.
feel so turned off by it. And
hmm
and we're like the sad thing is we're not taught any of this stuff. I really didn't start leaning into this part of myself until I, was in my 30s. And I wish that this was like more accessible. And again, like I'm so passionate that this is the message that you've decided to spend your time and energy on because it is so important for men
Thank you.
and for women. And
Yeah.
I'm just I would love to know like what is so for a man or woman, honestly, that's like doesn't know where to begin, that like is just starting to tune in to or become aware that like this is a part of themselves they would like to explore or get to know a little bit more. Like, what is some of like the easier places to start? Like, what could be somebody's like first step?
Mm, that's a great question. Um, I want to go back just a minute just to sort of share, because you said something really interesting was like, most people are never going to go do that stuff, right? And so what I realized, and it took me 38, 8 years to figure this out, was like my role in this experience is to go out and do all of the weird stuff, right? All of the esoterics, all the trainings, all this, and then take it and then synthesize it and then share it in the most digestible, palatable format so that any guy can understand it, regardless of where he is on that scale of 0 to 100.
Mm.
That is my entire goal for this business, for this service. You know, it's a service business. I want to help men and therefore women in their relationship dynamics. Um, but you're right. Not a lot of people are going to do that stuff, right? And so 20 years ago, when I sort of was just beginning this journey, there was no social media, there were no influencers in this space, there was no access really, right? Like there were people that were masters in the space, David Data, Montauk Chia, Charles Muir, et cetera. You have to usually go to a retreat in person and do this stuff because, or read a book, you know, but it wasn't like that accessible. Nowadays, it's really accessible. So as a woman, you know, I know four women right off the top of my head who are female influencers in this space, right? And what I would say is like, go binge their content, go
Mm.
listen to their content and feel if it resonates, right? We're
Mm.
able to say a lot on the internet these days. We can't
Yeah.
go into too many details, but we can say a lot more. You know, BB is a great example, Planet BB.
Mm.
She's phenomenal. You know, my Josephina Bashout, she calls herself the Pussy Priestess. Dr. Kat Meyer is phenomenal. But there's a ton of, I would say there's a lot more women out there who are doing what I'm doing than there are men. Because women, generally speaking, they're a little bit ahead of the curve. They're much more open and vulnerable talking about this stuff. So
Yeah.
I would say start there. And then if you're finding that it resonates, because you can learn a lot just by watching free content.
Yeah.
I post twice a day, and I've
Mm.
done it for the past year and a half, and that's what we do as a business. And so I post a lot of free information for people, mostly men, but also some women. Um, Binge someone's content, and if it resonates with you, see if they're doing any workshops or retreats, or go deeper, or buy some books, and start learning more about it. The challenge is usually like, how do you connect it to the partner, right? Like,
Mm.
what if you're the partner that's open to it, and the other partner isn't, right? And so that's something that a lot of couples do face, challenges with, as one of them maybe is opening up and expanding their consciousness and their awareness, and the other partner is not. More often it's the woman who's opening and the man is not, but it's not always the case. But there's a lot of resources out there now
Yeah.
that you can utilize. And you don't have to go to the retreat in Thailand with Montauk Chia to get a lot of really good information that you can apply in your regular life, with kids, with family, with work, with career, whatever it may be. So yeah, and I can even send you a bunch of other women that I know that do this stuff, who are really supportive and helpful.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. And your videos are super informative. I've watched a lot of them, and it definitely a great place to start because I don't feel overwhelmed by that. Like if I was a man, like I wouldn't feel overwhelmed by it. It's not like this is really complex and as you said, like I need to go and do 5 retreats before I can bring this into my life. Like it feels very approachable, which is a
Mm.
beautiful thing. And also, I feel like I have to ask because it it appears like you've had a lot of sex. And so I'm curious I'm curious just because I'm a very curious person. Like was this from a very young age? Like you just were like very connected to like your sexual energy and you wanted to explore more and that like evolved into adulthood and you just like decided you wanted to have a lot of sex? Am I right in like thinking that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Have I've had a lot of experience like with partners and then outside of partners as well. I'm a very physical guy.
Mm.
I played sports my whole life. I've always been connected to my body. I had, and I was an athlete, and so I was always in a position where, you're out and like I'm outgoing, gregarious. I can talk to people. I wasn't shy. I wasn't super introverted, right? And so you're in a position where you can connect with women, relatively easily. And I just think that being able to be intimate with another human is one of the most beautiful things that two people can experience, right? While we're here in these human bodies, right? Who knows what happens when we go into the next plane and we can't actually like, feel each other and talk to each other. So I was always really, yeah, maybe after college, I would say. I mean, I was interested in college, but then it sort of like ticked it up a notch, after that. And then I started the study when I was like 24, 25, always on the side of my professional life. So I was always running companies, doing things, and then I would do this stuff on the side. I didn't really tell anyone about it because it wasn't something that was like super, talked about, especially amongst guys. I would just do it because I wanted to learn, I wanted to discover. I'm a super, how do you say this? Um, I've always been pretty precocious. So, I was a black belt when I was 7. I trained martial arts for 3.5 hours a day for 4.5 years to get a black belt at that age. Like I started when I was 4. So like I've always been interested in something. And when I love something, I go in it really hard. And so I was like, oh, like this is a really fun thing to experience. And I would like to be as consummate and as knowledgeable as possible so that I could have the most harmonious experiences. Now, in my 20s, like, was I as conscious and aware as I am now? Definitely not, right? Like, you're out, you're going out drinking, whatever it is, like, things happen. But as you get older as a man, you start to get more discerning, you get more mature, you get more connected, you get more respectful, you start saying no more, right? And then you have a much, much healthier experience with, your sexual energy. So the answer is yes, I've put this to practice a lot. And that's the only way that I think that you can understand how to connect with another human is to have experience. Um, a lot of people ask me, like, are you a sexologist? And this and that. I'm like, so what is that? Like someone who studies the theory of sex? And I just personally don't really find it very relevant.
Mm.
I think it's much more important to actually have more experience in those acts so that you can get the most knowledge to then share from, right?
Yeah.
Like the most firsthand experience. Um, if that answers your question.
Yeah, it totally does. So this was more of like just a personal passion that you felt like a deep level of connection to, and it just
I have
naturally
three
like
planets in Scorpio. So if that's your question. Yeah, I love
yeah,
sexuality. I think it's one of the
yeah.
most beautiful things in the here. And this is why I'm here.
Yeah.
I've done a lot of
Mm,
different businesses, I've done a lot of different things, but like the reason why I'm here on this earth is to hopefully have an impact on the way that sexuality is viewed in the world and the way that men view their own sexuality internally, that they have a healthier connection with their own bodies, with their own minds, with their own sex centers, that they have more value and self-worth with
mm,
their sex centers. And then they can take those experiences into their partnerships in a healthy way, right?
yeah.
Because I think that when you have an unhealthy connection to your sexual energy and you're masturbating to porn 3 or 4 times a day and you're on dating apps and you're not actually like engaging with your own sexual energy in that healthy way, I think it's very difficult to have a successful partnership with a woman and be healthy in it.
Yeah.
And that's where we're at as men right now. It's like there's an epidemic going on. There's the porn epidemic, there's the pharmaceutical drug epidemic with Viagra and Cialis and generics and all that sort of stuff. And there's the Me Too thing, which makes men feel like they can't actually approach, and with the
Mm,
dating apps, which is so like disconnected. And so, we're in it, and I'm here. This is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Is
mm,
just really share and connect and be compassionate with men. Um, and the feedback that I get from in my DMs and in my across my socials, is that there are a lot of men out there that are hurting and they need
mm,
help,
mm,
and they don't necessarily have the resources or the outlet in order to like communicate and share, right? And
mm.
so that's I want to help those men, and elevate them to a better place.
Yeah, yeah, I love all of that, and it's such a beautiful thing when life sort of, like, puts you on a path or pushes you, sort of, like, nudges you in the beginning onto a path of something that maybe you're just curious about at first, and then things start to evolve and unfold, and it's like,
Hmm.
"Oh, yeah, this is the thing that I'm supposed to be doing." Like, I feel very connected to that as well, and I know, like, for women, there's this underlying feeling of shame around our sexuality, and I think that that, like,
Mm.
blocks a lot of women from really exploring, like, the depths of their own sensual side, their sexuality. That was my, like, biggest challenge and barrier for a really long time, and still something that I'm, like, very consciously healing and unpacking. Is that similar for men? Like, I know that you just said, like, a lot of men are hurting. Maybe it's a different emotion, maybe it's not shame, but is there a, like, underlying emotion that exists for a lot of men that kind of, like, is keeping them stuck from exploring or expanding themselves further in the bedroom?
Yeah. part of it is um, the well, aside, so obviously there's like the religious piece, right?
Mm,
And like the societal piece of like, you know, men allowing to like feel their sexuality and like really be connected with their sexuality. I think maybe it's easier for men than it is for women because women have the double-edged sort of like, oh, well, if she's into their sexuality, then she's, what all the words that, men use, people use to describe women who are loose, even though they're not, they're just connected, right?
mm,
Um, as men, I want to answer this. I don't think that we feel as much of the shame and the guilt and things like that as women do, but I think there's certainly some there. Um, being able to like work through some of the issues that men have. I think men's issues come from their own lack of confidence in themselves
mm,
sexually, right? So, when I was younger, like I'm a grower, I'm not a shower. And like being in the gym, being an athlete and all that stuff, you're like, oh wow, geez, okay. You're looking around the gym and like everyone does it and kids can be pretty brutal. And so,
mm,
that's one of those things where if you asked me when I was 24 years old if I was ever going to do this when I was older, like I would have said like no, that's crazy. So you don't know what's going to happen. But the the value and the self-worth and the confidence the men have in their sex centers is pretty paramount. And also, you think about the rampantness of ED, right? So men have one sex center to work with. If that sex center doesn't work, well, how do you think they feel about themselves?
mm,
That's like the one thing that makes them a man and makes them feel masculine and confident. And it's not working 30, 40% of the time, 50% of the time, depending on how old they are. And so I think it's more coming from our own internal challenges with our sex centers. I think it's less so externally focused, aside from like obviously the religion stuff, which would obviously be external. But I think that the women piece is a much more it's much more difficult in that sense because women want to feel liberated, but they don't want to be called a slut.
mm.
Or they, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like I don't know why we still need to do that anymore, but I guess it happens and it's real.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely feel the confidence piece, like, I see that a ton, and that really goes back to just the importance of, like, building up your man, like, words of
Yeah,
affirmation or loving on him or the physical touch piece, like, is so important, and I'm taking this in myself, like, even in the dating world, even early on in the beginning, like, it's important there too. And I think like that
hmm
is a little bit of a miss in the relational dynamic and certainly in long-term relationships. Like that just gets amplified even more because there's a lack of that. And
the
within that, like
complacency.
I'm
Yeah,
yeah, and I'm so curious your thoughts on like what do you think is one of the biggest challenges or blocks as to like why most couples would say that they're unfulfilled in the bedroom?
complacency
Mm,
is big. Lack of, I guess we think that it's sort of just is like supposed to stay the way that it was for the first couple years, right?
mm,
And the reality is that that's not the case. Everything takes work and it
yeah,
takes effort. It takes timing. It takes planning. And especially when you add on children and career and stress and money and disease and all the other shit that you have to deal with. And so I think that usually like is the area that gets worked on the least.
mm,
We're working on our careers. We got to make money to pay the bills, right? That's like the hierarchy of needs. Well, the sexual needs usually come last
mm,
because they're not the ones that are on the highest on the pedestal. And I ultimately think that that's the reason, why is we don't spend enough time, energy, and effort on it. Obviously, the hormones and shifts change. Like you're not going to be as, into your partner in year 6 or 7 as you were in year 1. Like that, those are obvious, which means that you need to work even more at it,
yeah,
and find ways to like expand through your sexual experience and communicate, like trying things that are on the fringe, maybe to like spice things up a bit. Um, but yeah, it's about and also conflating like your marriage is a business arrangement. It's business at the end of the day. That's
Mm-hmm.
why you're getting together. It should be for love, but there's also like a business that needs to be run. It's the business of your life and your household and your children. And those are all like logistical, administrative planning things. They're all very masculine and they're not sexy,
Yeah.
right? And so, um, one of the things that, I was suggesting is like for men and women, they can have two different communication channels, right? Like use iMessage for all your logistical planning stuff that you have with your partner and use WhatsApp for all like the sexy stuff, right? Where you could talk dirty to each other, you can give each other compliments, where like there isn't a single iota of logistical planning or administrative things in there other than like be here at this time and wear this dress, like something like that, right?
Yeah.
Um, where we are doing a better job at compartmentalizing our relationship, right? Focusing more on the relationship between the partners, the husband and wife, um, changing the way that we are with the children. Like we have this thing in American culture, like parents are obsessed with their kids and the kids take the forefront. Well, how do you think a man's going to feel? Right? He wants his kids to do well and to live. But like I think in non-American cultures, it's more like the partnership still is at the forefront and then the kids are like there
Yeah.
and it's very a little bit more European.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like if everything is focused on the kids, then like are the parents still taking the time to date, to flirt, to connect, to do all the things that they used to do? And I'm not suggesting that it's easy to do, but I think that there needs to be more time spent on it. I think is the ultimate answer.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely agree on that. And it takes both parties. Like both parties have to be willing to
Yeah.
put in the time, energy, effort that is required in a long-term relationship to keep things fun and spicy. I love that tip on having two separate communication channels. I think
Hmm.
that's huge. And then you kind of like expect it, if you see like a WhatsApp coming in, it's like there's like a
Yeah.
level of excitement, where it's like, yeah,
Yes,
I know
yes,
it's not going to
yes.
be like pick this up at the grocery store tonight. It's like this
Yeah,
is
go
more
take the
fun and
trash
fun.
out.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and you
Yeah.
can and then have fun with it. And but yeah, it takes work, and that's usually the thing that couples work on least,
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I within that, what do you feel like is one thing you wish women knew about men? And maybe that, this can be
Mm,
in relationship to like in the bedroom. I feel like there's a lot of misconceptions and I think like women are like wanting to connect more with their partners, but I think we're approaching it from our own perspective because that's the only lens that we're working from. So,
hmm.
like from your viewpoint, like what is one thing you wish that women knew?
How sensitive men are as it relates to their sexuality and their
Mm,
sexual capabilities and skills. Deep down, right? Like there's the outward appearance, but then like deep down, we're always questioning like, am I doing a good job? Does she like it? Is she
mm,
getting fulfilled? Do I have any idea what I'm doing? How do I navigate her body? Like there's just so much that goes on. And we put on this like front
mm,
that we got it under control. There's always that like, did she have a good time? Did she have an orgasm?
yeah.
Was this a good experience? I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um, and so that to me is about the communication piece, which is like the compliments, the reassuringness, the making sure that the man knows that you are that the woman is into him, like giving a guy a compliment on his cock, like that does wonders as long as it's genuine and it's real,
Yeah.
you know what I
Yeah.
mean? But like that type of stuff, like men love to have their egos stroked in those areas. And, for whatever it's worth, a man does have to have his ego stroked. He just does. That's just the way that we operate. We need to have that stuff, even if women don't resonate with it. And the other thing is recognizing that like men and women speak different languages. They communicate differently.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I'm trying to do with men is to teach them like it's not always linear, direct, get to the point. It's the circuitous route. right? It's
Mm,
the indirect route, right? It's the feminine. It's like if you can actually your experience will be enhanced if you can act a little bit more in your feminine in this scenario, right? Rather than like the direct. Similarly with women, when a woman can be, direct and clear and straightforward with the man in those scenarios and to hit him on the voice that he can hear,
mm,
right? In the way that he needs to hear it in the masculine, right? Um, that can be really, helpful too. And that's it's not a woman being in her masculine, it's just communicating in a style that's more masculine, so that
yeah.
so he's like, oh, yeah, I did good. I did a good job. You know what I mean? Because men, we want to please you. We're trying to
Yeah.
figure out how to do it for the most part. And it's not always easy.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Um,
and women are pretty complex creatures and our bodies are complex. And also like we're getting to a place where we're starting to understand our bodies more fully, or we have a desire to understand our bodies better or more intimately. And I think like it can go both ways of like, yeah, the man needs the affirmations that he's doing a good job so that he feels more comfortable and confident exploring. And so the woman
mhm,
like can communicate what she likes a little bit more. Like that dance goes both ways because the level of comfort for a woman to feel safe in like less performing and saying you want to slow it down and saying communicating
mhm.
the things that you like so the man's not guessing, like that has to be that dance that has to go back and forth. And so yeah, that I loved what you said there. I think that that's super important. And I have some like more kind of light like fun questions for you that I feel like the women are just curious, especially like the single women that I'm sure follow you. um I want to know your thoughts on sex on the first date. How do you feel about that? Is that a woman that you would date afterwards? Or yeah, just what are your general thoughts on that?
If there's a real connection, yeah, for sure. Um, but if there's not, you know, then how do I answer this? If you're not sure and you really want to get to know somebody, right? And like, then I would just say wait.
Mm,
If there is a really strong pull and a desire and a connection and you're feeling it in the moment and that's what it is, like be safe, right? But like, yeah, I think it's okay. I've dated people that excuse me. I've dated people women that I've slept with the first that night, and I don't think any differently about it.
yeah.
Um, but as a general rule, it's probably good to get to know the person a little bit
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And I think women have this idea that it builds connection, and the connection is for women specifically. The connection is built outside the bedroom or before you get to that place, and
Hmm.
slowing it down and building more of like a emotional connection like helps the intimacy become
Absolutely.
much deeper. Um
100%. 100%. Yeah, I agree with that in full.
are you single?
Yes.
And what are so I asked my audience some of these questions, and these were the questions we came back with that they came back with.
Okay.
Um, so they are coming from a real place. What is important? What's something that's like really important to you, or something that you're like looking for in a partner? It doesn't have to be necessarily like in related to the bedroom. That could be just more
Yeah,
general.
yeah, no. It's mostly not related to that. For me, someone who wants to build a family is important for me. That's like the first and foremost thing that I look for. You'd be surprised how many women are not interested in having kids these days.
Hmm.
And so I'm super practical. Like I always ask, like, are you interested in having a family at some point? Do you want to be a mom? Is that
Hmm.
important to you? Because it's important to me in the next couple of years. So that to me is like number one. It didn't used to be, but
Hmm.
now that is. and then it's, nurturing and people who that take care of their mind, their body, their spirit, someone who's open-minded and connected. And I'm an athlete, so I just like people who play sports and who are interested in, doing the similar things that I do. And also values, like understanding like who they are and what they believe in, right?
Mm.
Spiritual, but not religious. You know, connected in like a deep way to the universe, but being a good human, right? And just like following that sort of mindset is really key for me. Um, and I would say like the other thing that I love is just someone who's like passionate about life, right? Who's like happy and fun and like positive and exploratory and wants to discover, you know, um, I don't really know if like opposites attract all that much. Like
Mm.
maybe in some aspects, but I think that we generally like people that are similar to us in some capacity, or at least I do.
Yeah.
And so finding someone who has a lot of similar traits and then maybe 80%, 20%, right? 80% like, yeah, we could, because that means your life's going to be like more aligned versus the
Yeah.
20%, which may be different. But the values piece is big for me. Um, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All
Did that
right,
answer your
lady.
question?
You did. All right. The
Cool.
the
Good.
ladies got the answer. All right. This has been super, super fun and just real grateful
Likewise.
for just yeah, everything that you because it's very obvious that like this is your passion, that this is like your purpose. It shows and I can hear it in the tone of your voice. And it's again, it's something that's super important to me and my own personal journey. And so I just, yeah, I have a ton of gratitude for the work that you're doing and everything that you're putting out there. And I'm curious as kind of like a fun,
Thank you.
like last question, like what would be
Mhm.
your one tip for people to, in general, have better sex? If you could leave like
Mm.
one thing, big or small, what would that be?
Mm. For men and women,
Mhm. Or you could pick.
yeah, so there are a couple of things. The ability to create an environment where both people can relax the most
Mm,
is the best thing that you can do to have the best sex.
mm,
On the male side, they're not stressed out. They don't have any cortisol in their system. They can get an erection really easily. They can have fun and be playful because they're relaxed.
mm,
The woman on her side, she's breathing easy. She can surrender. She can feel into her body. And so it's creating an environment of like relaxation, trust. So it's not about moves. It's not about moves. Certainly it's helpful, but that's sort of like icing on the cake.
mm,
It's more about um, what kind of atmosphere is being created to allow both people to relax and enjoy and have fun together, you know, and that and you can kind of take that for wherever you want to take it. But that's what I find. A lot of men have issues because they're not relaxed.
mm.
They're nervous. They feel like they have to do this, they have to do that, they have to perform, they have to have a 9-inch cock, whatever. Like it's like, dude, no, you don't. Um, so that would be what that was like the first thing that came to my mind. Like the way to have better sex is to create an environment that is full of relaxation
Mm.
and that allows you to surrender and trust and enjoy better without having goals.
Yeah. I love that you said that because something that's huge for women is feeling that deep sense of safety. And when that's present, a woman feels, and I'll speak for myself, I feel way more comfortable to be like free in my expression in whatever that looks like in that
Hmm.
moment. But it requires feeling safe and again, relaxed, both could
Hmm.
be interchanged there. So yeah, that
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah. If it
that's
was directed at women, it would be like uh, creating environment for men, creating environment where the woman can feel safe, right? That's the vibe, the energy, the music, the this, that. It's how you are showing up in the experience, right? As
hmm.
someone who's like connected and present and listening and available. Um, you know, yeah,
Mhm.
that's beautiful.
I love this. Jackson, you're
Yeah,
great.
thank you so
Thank you.
much for having me.
Thank you for doing this with me. Super fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely.